You're listening to Secrets of a Bridal Seamstress Podcast. I'm your host, Nadine Bozeman. In this podcast, I'm sharing business systems and strategies specifically tailored to the bridal sewing industry so you can build your own modern and profitable bridal alterations business. Join me as I also get to chat with fellow seamstresses and share their personal success stories. I'm so glad you're here and that we can grow together in this unique trade. Hey friends, before we get into another episode, I wanted to share with you about a free private podcast series that we have available for you, all about the subject of branded fitting packages. So if you have ever considered charging for fittings or maybe adding a little bit of additional passive income to your average ticket, this would be a great free podcast series for you to explore. It also includes testimonials of bridal seamstresses who have added branded fitting packages to their own portfolio, and they share about their additional income that they've seen in the years since adding fitting packages. And we're talking about like $15,000 to $20,000 in revenue. So it's a big chunk of change. And I can confidently say that every bridal seamstress that has added branded fitting packages to their portfolio has seen this kind of exponential growth and benefit to their business. So I encourage you to sign up for that free podcast series, and it will hit your inbox as soon as you sign up. And you'll have all the tools that you need to create your own fitting packages and also put together a beautiful investment guide to share these services with your potential clients. So that link is in the show notes if you're interested in tuning in. And I'm really excited to learn what this could do for your business this year. Well, welcome back to another episode of Secrets of a Bridal Seamstress, and I'm really, really excited about this topic. I'm so excited for you to meet our speaker. I'm here with Becca Pountney, and she is a wedding business consultant living just north of London, and so she's coming all the way from the UK. So picking our time together was almost a challenge. What time is it over there?
It is 7:45 in the evening.
I don't know why that still blows my mind. I feel like a kid when it comes to like the time differences, but it's like 11:43 over here. Anyway, I'm so excited to have you on this episode because I recently heard one of your podcast episodes chatting about the not so glamorous side of being in the wedding industry. And it's kind of like one of those taboo topics. Some of my previous guests, other seamstresses have talked about maybe handling difficult clients or how to navigate those waters. But sometimes the difficulty comes from within your own niche or just kind of like the icky stuff that we don't really want to always cover. And you covered it so gracefully. So I'm really excited to later on in our conversation tap into that. So thank you so much for your time. How about you start by telling us where you came from right before we started recording? What were you doing today?
I have been at my singing lessons. So we were just talking before we hit record because I love to sing. And it's one of the things that I decided post-COVID to give as a gift to myself was to go back to do vocal lessons again for a variety of reasons, mostly just time out of the house, doing something that's not business, relaxing, working
Mm-hmm.
on my vocal training. But it also has good benefits for speaking on stage, speaking on podcasts, because, all the breath work, that kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
also helps. But yeah, I love to sing.
I saw recently that you were in a show. What was the show that you were recently in? And I was like, oh my gosh, you sing too.
Yeah, so we locally to me, there's a show called the West End Prom. So we had a full 16-piece band and we sang songs from the shows and it was just for fun. But again, it was the first time I'd sung solo in front of people for a long time. And I was
Uh,
terrified, like
yeah.
really, really terrified, which is funny because I will stand on stage and speak in front of hundreds and hundreds of people and not even worry about it. But to sing is a whole nother
Mhm.
level.
Oh yeah, it's like that's like your body instrument that it's like, oh, here I am. And I love that. I just love that you have something that has nothing to do with the business, has nothing to do with the weddings. It's just for the fun of it and for the joy of it. And that's such a great reminder to like, okay, make sure that you have we've talked about this with our membership of having like your unicorn project. Have you read that book or you're finding your unicorn space? It's a really cute book about finding like just a joy project or like an area of your life that isn't consumed by like the paycheck or like the goals. It's just some place to create, or it can be like gardening or singing or cooking or like whatever, just an additional interest. So now we know what yours is. That's a great way to start this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, I always say one of my mantras is there's much more to life than your business. So you have to have
Mhm.
other avenues, other things, because if everything you do is poured into your business and something goes wrong in your business, you don't want your life to fall apart because it's not
Oh,
that
yeah.
important. So have
Yeah.
other things to do in life other than business.
Right, and I feel like when I do kind of feel bogged down with honestly, whether it's like, okay, like podcast prep or it's like working with the brides, something that kind of settles me is hanging out with my local friends again. Like, okay, let me get together with my girlfriends who like see me on a regular basis. They're like real people in my life. They're not brides. And it just is like settling. And it's kind of like this reminder that, like, okay, that's just a piece of my life, but this is the life that I'm building the business for. And this is where I want the energy to like just really be preserved. So such a good reminder. Okay, tell us about how you got in the wedding industry. You're a mentor to business pros, so why do you love it? Like, what lights you up? Do you have like a niche that you like prefer working with over others? Who are your favorites?
Okay, so my absolute favorite people to work with are people that are kind of near the beginning of the journey. Okay, so there's a lot of educators that want to work with people who are trying to get to 6, 7 figures. For me, what really lights me up is helping people take their passion and turn it into something profitable. So they don't need to be a millionaire, they don't need to earn 6 figures, but if it means that they don't have to go back to their part time job, or it means that they can
Mm-hmm.
stay home with their kids and they can bring in income and start becoming profitable to then build on it, that's my favorite part. So it doesn't
Mm,
matter whether they're a seamstress, a photographer, a videographer. That's the bit that really lights me up. In terms of
yeah.
how I got into it, it's a bit of a story. Do you want to go deep into the story? Are you ready for
Yeah.
it?
We're here for it. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to take you back. I'm going to take you back to where all this began. And I was uh, 15 years old. And I
Oh
told my
gosh.
parents, I want to work in television. And my parents were so great because they always taught me you can do anything you want to do. Like if you want to work in TV, you go work in TV. And so they hooked me up with a family friend that they knew and got me some work experience in a TV station. And that taught me a huge amount. It taught me that I loved the world of TV and I went on to do a degree and work in that area. But it also taught me that you can do anything you want if you put your mind to it and if you meet the right people. So I did
Mm,
my degree in
hmm.
television. I worked in TV based on all sorts of connections that I built myself over the years, and I loved it. Then I decided I wanted a family, and as we said, there's more to life than work. And I realized TV is not the career to be in if you want to have any kind of life because you work
Hmm.
really, really long hours. So I jumped over to radio, and that's where between the TV and the radio, that's where I learned a lot of my marketing, and that's where a lot of my marketing background came from.
Mm,
I had my first child and I was like, I don't know if I want to work all the time or want to be home. And so I was like, what do I know? TV. So I set up my own wedding videography business. And that's where the step into the wedding industry
yes.
started. Okay. So you see, it's a bit of a roundabout story, but
Yeah.
that's what happened. So I set up my own videography business in Bristol, where I was living at the time in England with a friend. And we started doing videography for weddings, but we weren't going to the weddings. We were sending the cameras to people and they were filming their own weddings, sending them back to us, and we were editing them together. And
That's
so it
so
was super
cool.
fun. I mean, these days we would just do it on a smartphone, whereas then I was literally shipping this huge camera out to people. But it was great because it was a way to work around my small child. And
Yeah.
I part time worked at the radio still, and it was a lot of fun. Anyway, again, cutting a long story short, my husband got made redundant while I was on maternity leave and we had to relocate. So I relocated from Bristol up to where he got his new job up here in Bedfordshire, just north of London. And I was like, right, well, I have this video business, but I now have no connections because all of my contacts, everything was down in Bristol. And
Mm,
so I decided I'm going to see if anyone locally wants to meet up. So I went to a wedding showcase that I was exhibiting at, and I just went round and spoke to everyone and said, does anyone fancy meeting up for a drink if I put something on? And so everyone was like, yeah, that sounds good. And so I did. And one of the people I spoke to owned a venue or worked for the venue and said, you can hold some drinks at our venue if you want to.
hmm.
And so I was like, great connection. Okay. So
Yeah.
we had a drinks event. And that first drinks event, 30 wedding pros from Bedfordshire turned up. It was free for them to come along. It was just literally for me to meet other people.
Yeah.
And it was incredible. It was so exciting to get people in a room.
Because
But what happened?
they were probably waiting to get
Yeah.
together. Like they just needed somebody to initiate. That's awesome.
Yeah, they really did. And it was so good. And I love the feeling of collaboration in the room. There was people in there that did videography and we got on like a house on fire. We had great conversations about business. But what happened very quickly over the course of the next few months when I was putting on these drinks events were that people were asking me for help with their marketing because that's what I was
Mm,
doing. That was what I did in the radio. That's what I'd done in TV. And
yeah.
so I was kind of running my business and helping them as well behind the scenes. I put on a few little workshops at some of these drinks events to help people with social media. And the rest, as they say, is history.
That is so cool. And I like even just from your first interaction with like working with weddings, like I hear that again and again with wedding vendors of like, we have a skill set and it's very rare when like you grow up wanting to be a specific like wedding vendor, you know what I mean? But you have a skill and then you're like, oh, here's an industry that's constantly going. Like the wedding industry will always be alive and well. And I can just transition my skills into this industry and make a killing or like you said, like leave my day job, and that's what happened for me. I was like, I just love to sew. And then once I got into like, oh, I sewed my first like bridal gown and it was like, this could replace my teaching career. You know what I mean? So it's just like one like natural step. And then, yeah, you just initiating a hangout. You didn't start a marketing business or a consulting business. You were just like, let's get together and oh yeah, I can help you. Or like, this is a need. And I can like Brandy Gar, she's in Florida here in the States, and she's a consultant for wedding planners. And it happened the same way. She was just helping friends, like, oh, there are needs. Like I can help you figure out your marketing plan or like your, a strategy for this niche of your business. And it just one thing like naturally leads to the next. And that's like the best way to start a business.
Yeah, exactly
Yeah.
that. And I think
It's so
the thing
organic.
is, what you say about people not kind of saying they want to go into the wedding industry is what I see all the time. And it kind of takes me back to where I get excited in the industry is when I find people who are incredible at what they do, but don't realize that they can actually turn a profit. So they
Mm-hmm.
may love to sew and they see it as a hobby business or they do it for friends. And when I can kind of get my hands on their business and encourage them to say, like you can charge for this and this is how you market yourself and this is how we can get you noticed and this is how
Mm-hmm.
to work out how to charge things or set up a website and they start to see that they can make money from doing what they love,
Yeah.
that is what gets me excited.
Yeah. It's like that's where the magic happens. All right. So as your consulting business grew, was there like a habit or a tool? Because I guess at what point were you like, this can be like a full entity business in itself? And like what changes had to happen in your life to accommodate that, to be like a full-time consultant?
So it happened very, very organically. Like that, as we said in the story that I just told, I didn't ever really just change overnight. I didn't think I
Hmm.
want to be a consultant. It kind of just happened. And I always say to people, I grew my business very purposefully with my children. So when
Hmm.
I set up that first networking, I was actually pregnant with my second child, very pregnant when I did some of my networking. She is now 7. And so when I started it, I was like, I never want to have it so big that I can't be with them all of the time and have to put them in
Hmm.
childcare. And so as they went into more and more childcare, I just slowly expanded the business. And then 2 years ago, once they went full time into school, I was like, right, now's my time to expand a bit further. And actually, I can see that, give it a few more years, they're teenagers, it can expand a bit further as well.
Yeah.
Into
Yeah.
so it was a very purposeful growth. Again, I wasn't like, I want to get rich overnight. Really
Yeah.
not anything like that at all. I just wanted something sustainable that could
Yes.
keep me at
Yeah.
home with my kids and help other people. In terms of tools, though, that helped that grow, for me, it goes back to right what I said at the start. It's all about connections and who I knew.
Mm,
And networking is one of the biggest things that's helped grow my business. It's one of the reasons, we're here on podcasts. It's when you get to know people, you build relationships, you find new opportunities, and you help each other out. And what I love about networking and love that about that as a tool is it's something any of you listening can use because it costs nothing and it's one of the
mhm.
most effective forms of marketing that you can have.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes like from providing an excellent client experience, like that's networking in itself because that's your word of mouth. And then, I mean, I love connecting with local vendors because I feel like, okay, I'm not alone. And obvious, and like it's cool to have obviously connections like online, you know what I mean? But there's something really special about being connected with your local vendors because you're serving a local client. Like the Pacific Northwest couple is going to be different than a couple in the UK. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just going to be a totally different demographic that you're working with, and like really understanding the nuances of your area, I think is like golden. So I love that. And it's kind of one of those, like, because it's free, it's one of those tools that tends to get overlooked. Like, oh, connections, meeting people, what? Yeah, old school, but it still works.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say you don't know who your next connection is going to be or where it's going to
Hmm.
lead. And it might not even
Right.
be something obvious, right? It's obvious to say, oh, we should connect with planners, we should connect with venues. But what about the other people on the school run, the people you go to the gym with, the people you meet on the
Hmm.
bus? You don't know who they are, you don't know where they come
Yep.
from. And I see everyone as a new friend, as a new connection. We don't know where it's going to lead. Once I was on a school trip for my daughter when she was in her first year of school, and I was on the bus with one of the dads, and we were chatting in the back of the bus, and one of the children had a nosebleed. And so we were helping this child stem the nosebleed. And at the same time, we started talking about business, and we found out we were both in the wedding industry. And so we started, while this child was having a nosebleed in this completely non-wedding specific part of life, we built a connection and we've gone on to work together and do stuff together down the line. So you never know where your next
Oh,
connection is going
that's
to
so
come from.
cool. Yeah, just be open. That is really, really cool. That's like so funny. Wonder how the kid's doing now. Poor little nosebleed Timmy over there. Okay, well, I kind of want to transition into the crummy side of having a business in the wedding industry. And so like a few of these things that we've kind of gone back and forth about, like difficult clients, negative reviews, copycats within your niche, or clicks within the niche, or, what if we hear this phrase like community over competition, but what if actually your local niche, there is competition? Like, how do you handle it, And I think there's kind of like this like taboo around these topics, because like you don't want to be the one complaining, or you don't want to, you may feel like, okay, I'm the only one getting a negative review, or that reflects on me, or like I'm the only one really having a tough time with my other local photographers or whatever, like what's wrong with me, So this isn't really like brought up often, but I think it's such a necessary topic. So how do we ease into this? Do you want to start with like difficult clients and maybe negative reviews? Maybe we can start with the clients before we ease into like our peers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think before we get into it, it's really important to say that this stuff is totally normal. And that's why
Hmm.
I'm glad we're having this conversation because, none of us are living this Instagram perfect life. And it's really easy for us to look around at other people and think everyone's life is perfect. But
Yeah.
I've been doing this in this consultancy role since 2016, and it isn't all shiny. There is negatives, there are positives. And I've also worked with hundreds and hundreds of different wedding pros, and every single one of them has had their own stuff going on. So
Mm,
before we tackle some of these things, know that you're not alone in this. And actually, by talking about it, we empower each other. Because if you go to a networking event and you go up to people and you say, everything's amazing, my business is turning over loads of money, and everything is fabulous, then that kind of won't help other people open up to you.
right.
Whereas when you actually start talking about some of these challenges and say, things are good, but actually, I've been really struggling with posting on Instagram every day, or I'm really worried about how I look when I show up on TikTok. Like,
Hmm.
that's where we build the real relationships because we actually start to break down some of those barriers. So
Right.
this is
Yeah.
really important that we talk about it. So anyone listening, whether we're talking about it like this or whether you're just talking about it with a friend, be open, don't pretend everything's
Hmm.
perfect. So yeah,
Hmm.
let's start with difficult clients because I think it's easier for us to talk outside of the industry before we
I know.
dive
How do
straight
we
into the
ease
industry.
in?
Okay, I think one of the big things I say is quite often some of my clients will come to me when they have a problem with a client and they're like, I don't know how to deal with it. And the first piece of advice I always give is, okay, stop, let's take the emotion out of it. Because
Hmm.
I think in the wedding industry, we're all very highly emotional people who love our businesses and they are our babies. And we
Hmm.
we take everything so personally. And actually, sometimes we have to take a step back and remember it's a business. And it's not that they don't like us as a person or that we're a mean person or that we're not
Yeah.
a good person, but we just have to take the emotion out of it and look at the pieces through a different lens. And when we do that, it often changes the perspective. So,
Hmm.
whenever you have a difficult client or an email that comes through that upsets you, or someone says they don't like something, don't respond straight away and just go to someone else that can help you put it into some perspective and start stripping away that emotion and looking
Hmm.
at the facts, not what we feel by reading the email, but the facts. And
Mhm.
also, we need to remember at this point our boundaries and our business boundaries, and to remember these people are not our friends. Because often we think, oh, how can I make them happy again? How can I make them like me again? I need to bend over backwards to, change my contract or charge less or do all of these things. But actually, that's not a good business decision. So that's tip one, really, is take the emotion out of it and start to look at it
Mm.
like a
Yeah.
business. Because, let's talk about negative reviews. Right? If someone leaves us a negative review, it feels painful because we know our clients inside and out. But if we look
Mhm.
at any of the big brands, they get negative reviews all of the time.
All
And
the
I'm
time.
pretty sure they're not sat in their big swanky offices crying into their cup of tea every time someone leaves them a one-star review, right? It just happens. And I
Mhm.
know when I look at these big businesses, if I'm going to a hotel and I go and look at the reviews, I know I've got to take the rough with the smooth, because often I'll look at the one-star reviews and think, well, that's a load of rubbish. So
Yeah.
this person's obviously just having a bad day. And then I'll look at the five-star reviews and you make your own judgment. So one
Mhm.
negative review is not the end of the world, is not the end of your business. Don't treat it like it is. Remember, those bigger businesses aren't feeling that way. And then secondly, if you have a negative review, respond to it. Like, I think a negative review with no response is probably one of the worst things. So just respond to it,
Yes.
either with the
Yeah.
truth. So sometimes we get a negative review because it's an angry client. Well, then respond. Look at how the big companies respond to reviews, right? They'll say something like, I'm sorry to hear that you were upset with our service. As you know, we've spoken about it on email, but if you have any more concerns, please send us another email to
Mhm.
XXX, right? Keep
Yeah.
it really professional, but show that you are dealing with it and you are
Yeah.
good with your customer service.
Because oftentimes, like, it has already been dealt with, and then they come back and they just kinda wanna leave something, so that's great to make sure that you're acknowledging to the public who's reading this, like, "Hey, when there's an issue, like, this is what was done, like, we've already communicated, this person just needs to let it out on the interwebs, but this is already done," you know? So that's a great, yes, great tip.
And also, don't let people blackmail you with the threat of a negative review. I see this
Mm.
more and more as we go into, you know, the years ahead, and it upsets me a lot that people use this as kind of a social currency. So they'll say, if
Mhm.
you don't sort this out, I will leave a negative review. If someone says that to you, don't let that be a
Right.
threat. Just go on then.
Yeah.
Take the power back. Don't give the power to the other person. Because if you know you've been a good person, you've done the right things, you've stuck to your contract, you've acted fairly, don't let them bully you into doing something that isn't what you should be doing just at the
Mhm.
threat of a negative review, because one negative review will not bring your business down. And also, what happens is if someone leaves you an unfair negative review, quite often your customers and friends will rally around you and come back and leave you loads of positive reviews to try and overcome it because they feel bad.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I know. I've been the recipient of that phone call. Like, "Hey, can you leave me a 5-star? So and so just went off," or whatever. I'm like, "Okay, on it." So we have our ways to help buffer the sting. One of the things you said early on was just to separate yourself emotionally, and because it is so personal. And when you have to realize, like, you are not your business. Sometimes it feels like we are glued together as one, but the you have a completely separate life, you're a different person from the business. And also, like, we don't know what our clients are like walking in the door with before they even start to interact with us. And unfortunately, with bridal seamstresses, our difficult interactions with clients typically do happen face to face. So we have to be on and ready to accept that and just take some deep breaths and be the professional in the moment, and then, anticipate the follow-up email or whatever's going to come. But knowing that whatever's being said to you is really not being said to you. It's their expectations, or they have their money issues, or they have something that's happening within their family that they're taking out on you. But there's also a fine line of, I'm also not a fan of not taking any responsibility, because okay, there's always something that we can learn that could have been better communicated by me, or I could have included that in the contract, so when they signed the contract they knew exactly what the expectation was. Or maybe I should have been more forthcoming that this request that they had may not come to life the way that they're envisioning, so I should have communicated that. But you know what I mean, like, there's always like moments of reflection that we can have, but reflecting and growing is different than beating yourself up over it or just like melting.
exactly as you said, we don't always know what's going on in people's lives. And often what people say in their emails isn't necessarily entirely what's going on. And again, I remind
Hmm.
my clients of that sometimes when they get an email through or someone's upset with them. And I say, it may not be you. Like, we don't know what's happened behind the scenes. They may have had their partner telling them they've spent too much money on this wedding, or they may have their mum in their ear, giving them a hard time, or they may have had a loss in the family. You just don't know what's going on. And you probably are not their biggest problem. They're just taking it out
Yeah.
on you. And so it's kind of dissecting some of that before we respond and responding, we're responding professionally because we can never change someone else's reaction. We can't change how someone
Yeah.
treats us, but we can be in control of how we act, and we can sleep well knowing we've acted fairly. So if we feel like we've messed up and therefore it's fair to give some level of refund, that's okay if that makes us sleep better at night. But
Right.
being bullied into that decision isn't the same thing.
Yes. Yes. And I've had both scenarios happen where it's like, okay, I will gladly, give this portion of a refund. A few years ago, I had a bride who there were a couple, like, we had to like reschedule a couple appointments. And I think that's basically all that she was complaining about. And so I gave her a refund on her fitting fee with me, like her appointment fee, not actually the sewing work. And I felt fine about that. And I was like, thank you so much for your feedback because I want to make Sweet Francis a better experience for future brides. So it's like, I felt good giving her that refund. I had another bride that it was a really difficult time we had like a loss in our family. So I was going through that. And then she was very, very difficult and demanding money. And I was like, I just need you to get the heck out of my life. So I sent her that amount and I felt like sick about it because I'm like, I should not have sent that to her. But you know what I mean? So like I had regrets about that one, but I did not regret the other, refund of like the fitting fee or whatever. So it's like you do have to kind of decipher like what is going to give you peace and then what is just going to like get at you if you do decide to like give the money, or like you mentioned earlier, if you feel like you're being like bribed to get a good review or whatever, like that's not going to feel good either, handing that money over.
No, exactly, exactly. And I think the biggest thing is just take the emotion out of it. Look at it
Hmm.
in black and white. Imagine you're the big store or whatever it is and making the decision, or imagine you're making the decision for someone else's business. Because quite
Hmm.
often we're better at making decisions for someone else's business than we are our own. Because, someone will say to you, this is my scenario. And you're like, absolutely don't give them the money back because they signed a contract. But when
Yeah.
it's the other way around and it's our business, we're so deep into it, we can't always see that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's totally it. I've definitely given the advice, but then when it's what happening to me, I'm like, ooh, but I know how it feels now because it's happening to me. So it's not the same. It's not as easy. So cut and dry. But if you can even envision yourself, like if a friend were telling you the story, how would you react? Because then you are truly pulling yourself out of the situation and you're seeing it objectively. If like your seamstress BFF comes to you with this story, like how would you respond to them instead of like, how are you reacting now in the moment? So okay, so I guess now we can ease into the other professionals. Okay, so copycats within our niche. It's like such a pet peeve. It's like get your own ideas or at least credit me with the ideas because we all know it was my idea. So why don't you just say thanks? You know what I'm saying? And it's
Yeah.
happened, it can happen on both sides, whether you have like a podcast or membership, or whether you have, a consulting business, whether you have a in the wedding business itself, like as a seamstress listening, like it happens and it's like, help me. So help us.
Okay. So copycats in our industry is something that will drain a lot of your energy, yet you can do nothing about it. Okay. So that's
Mhm.
my first kind of thought on this is you have
There's
to
no hope because you can do
learn
nothing about it.
to let it go. Okay, because people will always see success and then try and copy it. That is just
Hmm.
how the world works in all areas of the world.
Hmm.
However, you need to hold on to the fact that no one will ever be you. Okay, so since
Exactly.
2016, all sorts of people have popped up and tried to replicate what I've done or what other people around me have done, but they will never be me. They will never have
Mhm.
my story. Okay, so they could wake up tomorrow and say, I'm going to be a marketing consultant to the wedding industry, but did they have those years of experience in TV and radio? No, they didn't. So their
Mhm.
experience will never ever match my personal experience. They might have their
Right.
own set of experiences that will help someone else. They may have a different personality to me that someone might resonate with. So I wish them all the success in the world. Off they go. Now,
Mhm.
often as well, copycats will undercut us and they will say, we're just going to go cheaper than that person. And that's even more frustrating to us because we feel like they're taking our job and they're making it cheaper to everyone else.
Yep.
But this is my favorite mantra of them all, and I use it all the time. You have to remember Disney never discount. All right. You can be Six Flags and you can have the cheapest theme park or whatever it is at the biggest discounts. But if you want to be Disney World, they never discount and you are paying top price, top dollar to go there and people are
Right.
still going.
Mhm.
So you've got to think, do I want to be the cheap person that has to cut corners because I've cut my prices? Or do I want to be the Disney that does everything with an impeccable customer service, a really high level, and people know that it's worth paying for? Okay, so
Mhm.
stop worrying about the people trying to copy you, the cheap theme parks. Just be more Disney because Disney never discounts.
We had a seamstress retreat in Austin earlier this year, and one thing we talked about was like really honing in on what is your superpower, because we all have one. We all have something that just separates us from the rest because it's who we are. Once we can kind of hone in on that, like that becomes your magnetic personal brand, because you are literally like oozing out of your business and you're going to be attracting the right people. And honestly, like if somebody wants to work with so and so, somebody else in your community, they probably wouldn't want to connect with you either. Like I think it's also coming to the realization that some people will want to work with you because it's you, and then there's some people who will not want to work with you because it's you. It
Yep.
goes both ways. You know what I mean? And but that also takes the pressure off, because it's like, okay, well, perfect. I'm going to be attracting the right kind of people, and they kind of figure out if I'm not for me, and then they move on, whatever. But there's not that pressure of constantly having to like come up with a new thing or getting ahead or making sure that like you are keeping an eye out on your competition. You could just chill and be you, and then it's like the right people will come along.
Yeah, absolutely. Stay in your own lane and just do your own thing
Yeah.
because, if you're the one who came up with the original ideas, you'll keep coming up with new ideas and let the people copy them because, again, people around us aren't stupid. And if they're in our industry,
Mhm.
they see what's going on, right? I had it recently where someone basically took one of my courses and is selling their own version for £9, right? Whereas I sell it for £97. But I had people messaging me and they were like, well, if they're only charging £9 for it, it must be terrible. I don't have to say, don't take this course because it's not very
Mhm.
good. It maybe it is good. Maybe some people the £9 thing will be fine. But I know that my thing's worth a whole lot more than £9. So if you want the
Mhm.
original real deal, you gotta pay for it. You gotta come to me. If you want the cheap knockoff version, go somewhere else, and that's fine. But
Yeah.
I think so much of it is to do with our own confidence. And
Mhm.
again, learning to let go and not using that energy draining thinking, oh, I wish they wouldn't copy me and feeling all
Right.
bitter and frustrated about it, but instead going, well, let them do that. And then when that customer has a terrible experience, they'll come right on back to me again and realize, it wasn't worth paying for it. I had this thing that I told my members about where I bought a ring light, right? I wanted a ring light to do my video. And so
Mhm.
I was feeling cheap and I went on Amazon and I bought a really cheap ring light. And guess what? It's rubbish and it keeps falling over and it has nips. And so then what do I have to do? I have to go spend more money and buying a
Yep.
more expensive one. I should have bought
Yeah.
the more expensive one straight away.
Yeah. And I think back to like the confidence piece, if you notice that your competitor is doing things that you've already been doing, it's like, okay, that's cool, because they may not say it to your face, but they know that stuff that you're doing is working and they want to be like that, you know? So it's like, I know we go back to that imitation is the best form of flattery or whatever. And although they'd never admit it, like, oh no, I came up with this idea myself, or like, no, I've been doing this like forever. It's like, no, you haven't. But I'm glad that I could influence you. You know what I mean? And so it's just kind of one of those silently satisfying things to notice. And then you just move on and whatever. It doesn't need to be a thing. But I think if you can be confident enough in like what you're doing and who you are and who you're serving, and just so this kind of goes back to what we covered at our retreat in Austin. Like it goes back to being so confident in who you are and what your calling is and who you're called to serve, and just like you said, stay in your own lane, like keeping those blinders on. Whatever happens outside the blinders, it's like you just learn to not even care, because that doesn't affect you. You know what I mean? But it's when you start looking around and like, oh, they're doing the angst begins, and like all this energy is poured into them that like your clients are going to miss out on. Like you're not giving your creativity that energy. You're just so focused on like the copycats. So it's like I know it does take a definite like mindset shift, but take it as the compliment that it is and like, oh, I'm so glad that you like what I'm doing.
I think it's important as well that we cover the other side, because there may be people that are listening who have it the other way and someone accuses them of copying the other way
Ooh,
around.
yeah.
So I think let's very briefly talk about that, because I once had a situation where two clients came to me individually and both of them said, like, I've got this really difficult situation where this person's copied my idea. And then the other person came to me and said, I've got this difficult situation where this person's copied my idea. And so they both thought the other person had copied their idea.
Yeah.
And when I spoke to them both individually, they did just coincidentally both come up with the same idea at the same time and launch at the same
Yeah.
time. And that sometimes happens. So
Mhm.
someone might come to you and accuse you of being a copycat when you're not. Okay. Now, if
Mhm.
that happens again, like, be a good person. If say, I'm sorry that that happened. I definitely didn't notice it. But
Be
it's
a good
that thing about
person,
being,
number 1.
it's that thing that I said earlier about being able to sleep well at night. So sometimes I will unfollow some of the people that do the same thing as me, not because they make me feel bad, but because I don't want to unintentionally, subconsciously copy them. Or even if they accuse me, I can say, like, point blank, I didn't even see that you'd done that because I don't follow you. And so,
Mhm.
protect yourself, know what you've done, and that's kind of it, really. Just
Yeah.
being able to go to bed at night yourself is more important. Have you been an honest person? Have you been a good person? Have you done everything ethically and right? Because if you have, you've got nothing to worry about, even if someone
Right.
accuses you of doing something that you haven't done. That's their problem, not yours.
Yeah, yeah. So I love that you address that too about like, okay, there's two sides to every story. And sometimes when you're accused, guess what? It doesn't feel good either because I think some of us listening have been there and it's like, what? I don't even know what you're talking about, but no, I didn't copy you. You copied me. No, I'm kidding. So now, okay, the clicks in the niches, like the clicks within the spaces. I mean, to a certain extent, I mean, you're going to gravitate towards some people, and then there's other people who you're like, meh, they're not my cup of tea. Okay. But I think too, within social media, slander and gossip can be so easy. And I know that like the past couple years, like gossip hurts, slander really hurts. And then it's like, okay, I could spend my time trying to defend myself, but I don't even know if those people care about me defending my name. So then it's like, okay, you know what I mean? But if things like that happen within, say, your photography niche or your catering niche or your seamstress niche where it already feels so small, how do you navigate that?
Okay, so a couple of thoughts. So the first thing is, I am really big on advocating keeping away from the drama. Okay, so there will always be people in any industry that attract drama, that bring drama, that create drama. And if
Mhm.
we find ourselves in a lot of drama, sometimes we have to reflect and think, am I the person that's creating all the
Am I
drama?
the
Okay, so
drama?
or am I not, right? So that's one thing. And I think, I personally, I try and keep all my spaces really positive. I don't tolerate
Mhm.
any negativity. I don't tolerate gossiping. And if someone tries to gossip to me about someone, I really try very hard to stop that, like, stop it in its tracks, because sometimes we can feed things and we all kind of jump on board and we get really negative, and
Mhm.
it's just a waste of everyone's
Yeah.
time and
Yeah.
energy. So, if people are mean girling you or whatever it is, like, just let it go. Go back to the things that matter to you, which is your family that you live with, your friends outside of the industry. Spend some time
Mhm.
there for a while, let it diffuse, and just move on and go find some other people. There will
Mhm.
always be people that will be your friends. There'll always be people that actually you don't want to associate with. And I
Mhm.
like to think that I'm a kind and good person to everyone I meet, but I'm sure that there's people along the way that don't like me or have been upset by me unintentionally, and
Mhm.
there's not a whole lot I can do about that, again, as long as I know I can sleep at night because I've done the best that I possibly can.
Right,
And
right.
not everyone will think like you. So, as I've been preaching all the way through this podcast, I'm all about networking, community, lifting each other up. And I like to think in my mind that every single person in the wedding industry has the same mindset. But we know that that's not true. So you
Right.
have to find the people that have the same kind of mindset and go out there and actively search for them. That's where, membership groups and paid communities can be really positive spaces,
Mhm.
because they are people who genuinely want to kind of go into this with a business mindset and be in there
Yep.
for the right reasons. You
Right,
need to
right. And they're
resonate with the people
invested.
that exactly, and they're not just in a free group, turning up to cause the drama. So,
Mhm.
find yourself community, find yourself spaces, and if you can't find something that suits you, create your own. And it doesn't
Mhm.
need to be, I'm not saying, create this full membership paying thing. I just mean, do what I did right at the start. See if there's some people that want to go for a drink locally. Because if they say yes, they're probably like-minded people like you. If they're
Mhm.
like, oh no, we can't do that because you do the same thing as me, and therefore I don't want to tell you my secrets, well, they're probably not the people you want to build relationships with. So be kind to them and go find some other people.
Right, right. Yeah. And I think too, we have this idea of, I love how you said we want everybody to like us because yes, like I know I feel that way. Like, okay, I want to be friends with everybody and we're all gonna get along and one big happy family. But it's like if that's not the case, you don't need to force it. You can still be professional, but also not force maybe what's not there. You know what I'm saying? And so just I think when you said if you sense the drama, it's okay to just professionally step back and acknowledge as much as you'd like to that you feel like is still like respectful and professional. It probably also depends on the nature. If this is somebody like local that you really can't necessarily avoid, absolutely keep a professional and kind relationship going. If it's somebody that like you've never met and they're just on the interwebs and they're annoying or they stir something up in you, then you don't necessarily need to follow them. Ooh, can't believe I'm saying that. But okay.
And kill people with kindness, because often people can change their minds. Okay. I've
Mhm.
had over the years a couple of different things. So once I was speaking at a wedding show event, and one of the vendors made a complaint about my talk. I don't know why. I think like in hindsight,
I
I think
would
they were
die.
I think
Oh my
they were having a
gosh.
bad day, because I reflected and I was like, but I've done this talk lots of places. It's always been fine. I think they misheard it or they took it the wrong way or something's going on in their own life. And so
Hmm.
I actually went over and said, I've been told that you put in a complaint about my talk. I'd love to just find out what it was because I'm so
Yeah.
sorry you feel like that way. And we had a kind of 5-minute brief conversation, and then I walked away. 6 months later, she joined my membership, and I was like, and she sent me an apology, and I was like, you know what? That's really refreshing. Like, I like this because, I could have decided that I'm going to have a grudge against you for the rest of my life because you made a
Hmm.
complaint about my talk. But actually, you know, things happen. It was a bad day. And now we have a good working relationship.
That is so funny.
It's not always the end of the world. And so kill people with kindness. Just be kind to them, even if people don't deserve it. Because
Hmm.
one of the biggest things I learned in television when I cut my teeth in the TV industry, you have to start at the bottom of that industry. So when you go into a television industry, you might be on a glamorous set, but you are at the bottom making cups of tea, emptying bins. But they teach you to be kind to everyone because you don't know where those people are going to end up. So the people that I was
Mm.
emptying bins with and making cups of tea with are now some of the top producers on TV shows here in the UK. Some of them work for Disney, some of them work for Sky. Like they are huge producers, directors, all sorts of places. But
Yeah. Wow.
they will remember the people that were kind to them when they were making the cups of tea, and they will remember the people that weren't. And so I've learned in life, you don't know where someone's going to end up next. So just be
Hmm.
kind and
Hmm.
friendly to everyone, even when they don't deserve it. Keep it polite. Don't talk about people behind their back. Don't start the drama. Don't start the gossip. Just take people as you find them. Don't listen to other people's opinion. If you've never met someone before, take them as you find them. Form your
Mm.
own opinion. And, you will go a whole lot further. And sometimes
Yeah.
someone will be negative and actually come round and end up being your friend.
Yeah. Like surprises every day. Yeah. So, because it sounds like these type of experiences have totally made you stronger and probably so much better at what you do as a mentor because you've had to deal with somebody that who you're like, okay. And I think too, especially as women in a similar industry, I think that can potentially just cause weird feelings and angst that doesn't need to be there. And so that's why like I mean, I do love the hashtag community over competition. But what that takes is humility. Like you need to be humble enough to be like, oh, you are better than me at this particular avenue of our business, or I really love your ideas, or it's like acknowledging that you're not perfect and that other people are going to be doing things well too. It's not just you. And I see that when we have like in-person events, I've seen that within our own membership, within retreats, like people who approach any situation, whether it's a one-on-one connection or it's like within a group, when you approach a scenario in humility, it's a completely different experience. And I see that person experiencing it differently than the other person who comes in with like ego. Like, I've got something to prove. I'm the best one here. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, you're going to get out of this what you put out of it. But when you come to a situation or even like an Instagram community or whatever, like with humility, you just have a completely different experience and like more empathy for others. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think you will reap what you put out there. So if you go
Hmm.
to an event or you talk to other bridal seamstresses or you talk to people in the same niche as you and you go as an open book and you say, like actually my favorite kind of connections are people that do the same as me because there's a lot of weddings happening in our state and I can't possibly service them all. And actually when we all get better, all our businesses get better, we can all put our prices up. A rising tide
Hmm.
raises all ships. I can learn from things that you've done
Yep.
before, you can learn from things that I've done before and we all see more success. It isn't that one person's going to be super successful and the other people are going to stay at the bottom. Let's all get
Right.
more successful together.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, thank you for all that. I'm so excited. And I feel like this is going to be such a great episode for listeners because I feel like there's so many nuggets. People are going to be like, oh my gosh, that's me. Oh, that's me. Oh, you know what I mean? So moving on to something like a little more light. When you're not working with wedding business owners and you're not acting as their mentor, what do you do for fun aside from singing? Like, what's a fun
So
weekend for you?
a fun weekend for me. Well, I have two children. One is 7 and one is 10. They both play a lot of soccer. And so I spend a lot of time on the side of a football pitch, as we call it here in the UK, watching my children do that, watching them dance. I'm definitely at a phase of life where it's all about the children having more of a social life than me.
Hmm.
And this is funny as well because it kind of goes back to what we're saying about not taking the Instagram picture as the picture. Because once my mum messaged me about a year ago and she was like, "Do you ever see your kids anymore? Because on Instagram, you look like you're always working." And I'm like, Mom, I'm not putting like every football practice, every dance class, every swimming class, every dinner time on my Instagram. Of course I'm not. Like, that's my family time. That's what I love to do. So that's like, if my mom even bought into the reality of my Instagram, we know that there's a problem, right? So yeah, that's what I love to do. I'm very family orientated. So we do a lot of stuff together as a family. And yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Hmm.
I like to encourage my kids, like my dad encouraged me, that they can do anything that they want. So right now, the 10-year-old wants to go to Florida and be an Imagineer at Disney. That's his
Ooh,
life goal. And my daughter wants to play professional soccer and she wants to study in the US. And in my mind, I'm like, you can do anything you want to do. If that's what they want to do still, when in
yeah.
10 years' time, I will support them every step of the way.
That is awesome. And that kind of goes back to your like what you teach your clients is like your family, like your home life comes first. Like it's all about the balance. Like what's your motivation for this? It can't just be the business itself. Yeah. What
Exactly.
is your best kept secret as either a wedding pro or a consultant for wedding pros? Because we're all about the secrets around here. So best kept secret.
Okay. So my best kept secrets are always to go into any networking business relationship expecting to give more than you expect to receive. This has always
Mhm.
been my kind of superpower is whenever I try and build a relationship with anyone or any venue or any supplier, anything like that, is don't go into that relationship thinking, well, if I make friends with this person, they're going to give me loads of work because that is
Mhm.
always doomed to fail because they will
Yeah.
see it a mile off. Instead, go into every relationship thinking, what can I do that's going to benefit you? Okay, I'm going to give you an
Mhm.
insider secret here, right here, an exclusive for the podcast. So, one of the things on my bucket list for a long time has been that I've wanted to speak at Wedding MBA out in the States. And so I came out to Wedding MBA last November at my own cost uh, to come out and to come and experience the conference. And
Mhm.
as part of that, I thought to myself, what can I do to benefit the people who run Wedding MBA, to benefit Shannon and their team. And so while I was out there, I got to work and I had my podcast microphone with me and I went round and I spoke to people and I interviewed people and I created a whole why you should come to Wedding MBA podcast, not because anyone asked me to, but because I wanted to give
Yeah.
something to build that relationship,
Mhm.
and they loved it. They republished it on their podcast. And guess what? I'm coming to in November to speak at Wedding MBA. So you have to go into these relationships thinking, what can I do for that
Yeah.
person without expecting something back? So if you want to
Mhm.
go and build a relationship with a photographer, don't go into that saying, can you come take photos of me for free? Because that's not going to benefit you, right? Instead, think, what could I do for them? Okay, I have an Instagram channel. Maybe I could promote them on there. Maybe I could ask if they want to be interviewed on my
Mhm.
Instagram or go live or do a takeover. Or perhaps I could ask them if they've got any shoots and they need a dress for it. Like, think about what that you can do for them rather than what you can take from them.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. And I think that also goes back to the humility piece. Like, It's not about you. It's not about you. And people just appreciate that so much because I think it's so refreshing when you meet somebody who's truly like others focused. You can't help but notice that. Like it's such a light, you know? So I'm really excited to get this interview out. Thank you so much. So tell us where listeners can find you and how we can follow your journey and then start stalking you when, Wedding MBA comes up again. We can start cheering you on.
Yeah, please do come and find me. If you're going to be at Wedding MBA, come to my talk because I've got this terrifying vision of standing in a big room in Las Vegas on my own because no one wants to come to see the English lady speaking. But no, if you want to find me, Instagram is always a good place at Becca Pountney, spelled Poun for November, Tney. But I'm sure you'll share all of the links.
Oh,
And
yes.
I am an open book. Please do reach out to me. I don't have some assistant doing my DMs. Like if something
She's
came
doing
up
her
for
own
you in
dance.
this if you have something come up for you in this episode, if you want to chat it through, feel free, reach out, come say hello. I promise I won't bite. I'm a friendly person. I will always come back to you.
Yeah, very approachable. Well, thank you so much, Becca. And we just wish you the best with whatever comes next in your mentoring business. We're excited for you and just for your word to spread.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and share this podcast with a friend. And if you're feeling really generous, leave a review. Thanks, everyone.